Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. Um, we are about to start, and I am asking everyone to just a couple of housekeeping. So thank you, first of all, Anthony and Noga for joining me, and thank you everyone else who joined on this short notice. We never had such a huge sign up in such a short notice. So my name is Offir Gutelzon, and I'm a co-founder at Unacceptable for Saving Israeli Democracy. I'm based in Palo Alto, and we are we just having this pop-up conversation with Anthony as we are really trying to do everything we can to end the war and bring everyone home, the hostages, the soldiers, and to end the famine and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So we thought that that could be a good situation to talk to Anthony after what we heard over the last weekend or the last week. Um, and I want to kind of like give you a bit of background to why we're doing that. So, as you all know, we are fighting in the last 5 years for making sure Israel stay Jewish and democratic state. Obviously, before October 7, we were really fighting for that, for the judicial overhaul, and then post October 7, we were fighting for returning the hostages and to make sure that we dismantle. Everyone wanted to dismantle Hamas, but now we are 19 months to the war, and a lot of things happened since then, and we still need to dismantle Hamas. But this war became what we believe is a war that is only for political reasons and for the messianic needs. So we have with us today a big group of people that joined us from Israel, from the States, from around the world. And as a reminder, again, choose the channel for the language. Our hope is that what we are doing now today here is a warning sign for all of us to make sure that we don't fall into anywhere that is coming across things that our country, Israel, will need to deal with already, will need to deal with for many years forward. So we're trying to minimize the challenges that we are going to have, and it's going to impact us all also here in the US as Jews and Israeli Americans, and obviously Israelis themselves. So with that, I want to introduce Noga that will join me in interviewing Anthony. Hi, Noga.
Hello.
And I hope you all following Noga on Twitter and see her on every night in so many channels. You just came out of NPR, I think you said.
Yep.
So Noga is a well-awarded journalist, and I will just say, Anthony, thank you for joining us, and I will just introduce you, and then we can jump, and Noga will start, and we'll take it from there. So Anthony is Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. He was commissioned into the United States Army from West Point. He serves for 25 years in the Army as a combat infantry officer and a Special Forces Green Beret officer. Over his military career, he deployed to Iraq 3 times, Afghanistan 3 times, Syria, Tajikistan, Jordan, and the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And he is a highly decorated combat veteran and has earned the Purple Heart, wounded in combat, a Bronze Star for Valor Combat, similar to the Israeli Medal of Courage, and an Army Commendation Medal for Valor in Combat, similar to the Israeli Medal for Distinguished Service. And he was in Gaza working under the GHF, and probably I should say I mean, we will talk about what the structure was from May 17th to June 26th in 2025. So, Anthony, thanks again for joining. Noga, I'll let you start, and we will take it from there. And when you want me to play the clip from the BBC, let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony. It's an honor to have you here. We're lucky to have you. I want to start with a kind of background question and ask you, what did you know about this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation effort when you joined? And who did you know what you knew from?
When I first joined this contract and this effort, I knew very little about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. There was very little information about them and what it was. The subcontractor that I worked for was UG Solutions, which is based here in North Carolina, where I live. Um, I did not know anything about UG Solutions either. I had never heard of that company. They contacted me in May, mid-May. They contacted me to ask me as a recently retired special operations officer. They said, we're looking for people with your experience and knowledge and expertise, and are you interested in this contract, this mission? So we discussed it on the phone in terms of what it would entail, and I told him that I was interested. And then I did an interview and I got hired, and 2 days later I was in Israel.
So you were headhunted by a murky outfit. And I want to then jump a little bit ahead, not too far ahead, 10 days hence. You already wrote a memo outlining the severe flaws that you saw in this outfit that had hired you. And I want to point out something that I think hasn't been sufficiently reported. And it's that 2 days earlier, on May the 26th, which was the first full day of operations, if I'm not mistaken, the head of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation quit. Jake Wood, who had been hired to head it, he said he was leaving because the way this operation had been set up, he said, was not able to fulfill the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So I want to know, what was going on in those days? What made him quit? Did you chat with him? Was there talk among the staff that had been hired that there were severe problems? And what spurred you to write such a dramatic memo on day 2 or day 3 of operations?
So I did not know Jake Wood, the former director of GHF, who was replaced by Mr. Johnny Moore. I've never met anyone in GHF. GHF is kind of a shell organization. It's got, Johnny Moore at the head of it, but the actual contract mechanism in Israel is a company called Safe Reach Solutions. They're actually the ones that are doing the execution of the contract work. So I did not know Jake Wood. I was in Israel already after that first day. Obviously, I was in Gaza, and I read the news that Mr. Jake Wood had stepped down and what his reasons were. And when he stepped down for his reasons, I can tell you from my perspective that I could not agree more. That he was exactly right. And when we first got into Israel, there were very clear indicators to me before Jake Wood stepped down, before we even did any distribution. There was no established rules of engagement. There was no established standard operating procedures for engaging with civilians in the area. The sites themselves, there's only 4 sites in Gaza right now under GHF. So if you think about 400 sites under UN, 4 sites exist now. 3 of those 4 sites are built very close to one another, within a few meters, a few hundred meters of each other in the southern portion or the southwest portion of Gaza in southern Rafah near the border of Egypt. And those sites,
let me maybe put on the screen the map that you sent me.
yes, incredibly, yeah, helpful.
And that would actually give people the sense of what it's looked like. Hold on. Let's see. Can you see it now?
Yep.
So
Okay.
this map here is laying out Gaza. You have the Mediterranean Sea, you have the border with Israel, the border with Egypt, and to the north, the Erez crossing, and the border with Israel near Ashkelon, and up towards Tel Aviv. So if you look at the 4 orange squares, you have SDS-1 so an SDS is a secure distribution site. That is where we distribute the aid from, and that's the only place we distribute aid from. So if you look at this map, to me, it was quite concerning in the beginning when we went into Gaza on the 21st of May to look at the locations, to get an understanding of the locations. I was expecting to see many, 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 many more. There were only 4, and 3 of them located down in the south near the Philadelphia corridor and the Egyptian border. All 3 of those were built immediately in the co-located vicinity of an IDF military position. So the IDF positions were already there. These sites were then moved in and built right next to these IDF positions in an area where military operations, Operation Gideon's Chariots, is ongoing in the south, from the south into Khan Yunis in central Gaza. That was very concerning to me from a military professional, that it's not in line with humanitarian law. It's not in line with international law. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention to have humanitarian aid distribution sites in an active war zone. So that kind of concerned me. So Jake Wood's
just to
reason...
clarify, Tony, just to clarify that I understand what you're saying is that obviously there is a fight against Hamas all over Gaza.
Yes.
And a lot of the population was moved south even before the humanitarian decision of Israel to take over the humanitarian when they took off the UN back, I think in January, they decided to cut off the UN, and then in February, but Noga, you maybe can correct me on that. And you're saying that many of our soldiers, Israeli soldiers, our young soldiers who are in Gaza, and I mean I just want to say that I mean I hope that many of Israeli parents of soldiers are here to understand that. So you're saying that those distribution sites are located not in a separate from the Israeli bases, but within where the Israeli forces are kind of like based.
Inside of where Israeli forces are based and are operating from. So yes. So about what you had mentioned about the location of civilians. So up north you have the Netzarim corridor. And then to the north, obviously to the north of that, you have Gaza City, and you have North Gaza, and you have Jabalia. So any Gazan in North Gaza, any civilian in there can't go south of the Netzarim corridor. So they're isolated in the north. Down in the south, you have the line that comes from the Sufa crossing to the Al Mawasi area. That's the Marag corridor. That corridor, there's no civilians or Gazans south of that. All of that is a kind of a military operational staging base for the Israeli Defense Forces to conduct operations into central Gaza. So a lot of the civilians have been displaced from central Gaza, either to the north over the Netzarim and they can't come south, or to the south in vicinity of the Khan Yunis camp, the Al Mawasi camp, and the Nasser camp, which are all north of the Marag corridor. So where the Israeli forces are staged to do their operations in central Gaza is operationally and tactically sound. That's a good plan. It's not a good plan, and it's in violation of international law to then go and put humanitarian aid sites in that operational area. It puts people in danger. It puts the civilians in danger, but it also puts the Israeli Defense Forces in danger. It's a risk that should not be taken.
So Noga, you, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
when you began to have questions about this plan, which from what I'm understanding, what you're saying was pretty much day one, what did you hear, if anything, about who had come up with this plan? Because you're describing aid distribution sites or secure distribution sites that were neither secure nor actually planned for distribution. So you're reminding me of that period when in the Israeli cabinet, the most extremist of Netanyahu's ministers were discussing what could possibly be a plan that would basically spur Gazans to leave. And so I'm going to ask you bluntly, did you wonder whether this entire setup, this whole scheme was conceived with other aims in mind other than distributing aid to Gazans? And what did you know about who had come up with this plan?
So I do know that the plan itself, in terms of the locations where they would be, was kind of a coordinated planning effort between Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the Israeli Defense Forces, and Kogat. Those were the kind of the main players in how these sites would be built, how they would be run. So from the very beginning,
if I can interrupt you for just 1 second, Kogat is a branch of the IDF. I'd like everyone to know.
Yes.
And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, to the best of my knowledge, was conceived of by some combination of the Israeli government and the Israeli army. So you're describing three bodies, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Kogat, and the IDF, that more or less are the same thing. I just want to have everyone understand the lingo you're using.
Yes. And so when we first got to the, when we first saw the sites, myself seeing the locations, I immediately thought to myself that either whoever planned these has no idea like how military operations and humanitarian operations and considerations for civilians on the battlefield, whoever planned these either has no idea of that at all, or they planned these very well for a different purpose. The purpose that I see that is they're absolutely designed, established, set up location-wise for the forced displacement of the civilians within Gaza. That's in order to get to any aid, any food at all, you have to walk 10 to 12 kilometers from where you live to the south. And once you get there, so if you come from the north of the Marag corridor and you go south of the Marag corridor to these sites, you then can't go back home. You can't then go back to where you came from. You're then sent to either the Nasser, the Mawasi, or the communist camps that are in those areas. So, I mean, there is no gray area about it. That is the definition of displacement. And the reason that I brought this up in terms of war crimes is not because I'm making an opinion or some type of subjective analysis. This is objective. This is fact. Displacing civilians on the battlefield, which all of central Gaza is a battlefield, which we all know that. Displacing civilians on the battlefield is a violation of humanitarian law. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention. Using food.
Okay, let's
go ahead.
No, please finish. Sorry.
Yeah. So looking at this in terms of the beginning setup, my position, my concern that I brought to the attention of the leadership was, first of all, the establishment of these sites and how we're going to run this is in violation of humanitarian law. 2, despite that, the way the sites are actually physically constructed and established are going to put everyone in a great risk and a threat for trampling, rioting, overcrowding, confusion, massive amount, thousand civilians moving through Israeli Defense Force positions. Like, that's just a recipe for disaster. And then how the sites were going to actually be distributed. The distribution model was we were going to drive up, dump 25,000 boxes of aid into a pile, and then release the 8,000 to 10,000 crowd of people and allow them to come down and get the aid. That was to me, that entire thing screamed of danger. So Jake Wood, prior to that, left for those reasons. I identified those reasons on my own with my own eyes, and then made a report that I gave to the leadership so they knew, like, hey, these are my concerns and these are serious and these are things that should be addressed. And that was on the 28th of May that I provided that report.
I want
Okay,
to ask something, Noga. I mean, both to explain, and I want to also just give a little bit of baseline. I mean, there is always this question, and you have this experience, Anthony, before. The question is like, why do we even need to give as an enemy, right? If Hamas is the enemy and we are fighting, our enemy, I mean, was there ever other people that gave humanitarian aid to those who you are fight with, right? And you have been in this experience. So can you explain this method of like separating the population from as someone that is in the fight zone? Was it done before that people are separating the population in order to give them humanitarian effort or humanitarian aid while fighting the enemy? I mean, is that something that is common in the battlefield, or is that something that Israel is doing and no one else did before?
It's a great question. And I want to say, so I kind of wanted to open up with this, but what I want to say first is I absolutely, without question, stand with Israel in the fight against Hamas. I went to Kibbutz Be'eri and to the Nova Film Festival site, and I saw it and I felt it and I understand it. And my mother is Jewish, and my mother's mother is a survivor of the concentration camp. She was a Polish Jew. I feel it. I get it. I understand it. I stand with Israel in the defeat of Hamas. However, if we as a society, Israel and America or the world, say that what Hamas did, that we're just going to do that in turn, that we're just going to act like they did, we will lose our humanity. We will lose our sense of values. As hard as it is and as painful as it is, we can't become that. We cannot. So to your question of, has there been incidents in history? Absolutely. There are incidents throughout history going back to the biblical times and the siege of Jericho, where civilians were separated and not targeted by a military force. World War II, World War I, Stalingrad, in Germany and France. Great effort is to. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that we always get it right. I'm not saying that. But there's always an extraordinary amount of effort to separate civilians from combatants and to figure out how to keep civilian populations safe in war from the belligerent, the two belligerents, in this case, the Israel and Hamas, that keeping that civilian population safe. And so again, being in Gaza, and this was something for me that was a moral tension for me, going in and doing the humanitarian aid piece, because I felt that, we're going to go in and feed the Gazans, and Hamas is just going to take the food, and it's just going to perpetuate the cycle. And I felt also that, Hamas took no consideration of killing children or women or doing brutal and horrible things on October 7th, and even before October 7th. October 7th is not day one. They've done it before that, and I understand it and I get it. But not every civilian in Gaza is Hamas. So we have to take an effort to protect the civilian population during the fight against Hamas, to put humanitarian distribution sites, to put food, the only food that they can get, in the middle of the war zone, in the middle of the combat, is not protecting the civilian population. It's not taking steps to protect the innocent, unarmed civilian population. But Western nations, have always taken effort. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria in the fight against ISIS. I was when we fought in the Battle of Raqqa, when we were fighting ISIS out of Raqqa, there were civilians everywhere. And we had to protect them primarily, even if it meant at times that it was a greater risk to us.
And at that point, did the US did the humanitarian effort, or you were brought like a third party to actually give the humanitarian effort after you separated them? Because the big question is like, why is Israel even doing that?
Well, so what I would say is you want even under ideally and in accordance with international law, a belligerent, and I say belligerent, a belligerent are the two sides of a war, right? You have your belligerents, the two people fighting. A military army should not be the entity that is then doing the humanitarian assistance. Now, I want to clarify this. Humanitarian aid is simply one aspect of humanitarian assistance. So the mission of humanitarian assistance, where through that you're distributing humanitarian aid, whether it's food or water or medicine or formula or Pampers or diapers, whatever the aid is, that should be something that is separate and distinct from the military fighting force. Because, a couple reasons. One, it will inherently put civilians at risk if the military fighting force is also doing the aid. Two, it takes away from the effort of the fighting force that's trying to achieve some type of military or political objective. So in Gaza right now, where you have Israeli forces that are there at great risk and they're fighting Hamas, they can't focus on their mission of fighting Hamas to finish this war because so much of their resources and efforts are going into assisting the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in securing these sites. Massive amounts of resources and combat power going towards protecting and executing and supporting these sites, whereas that effort should be focused on fighting Hamas and finishing this war.
Okay,
so somebody else, like whether it's the UN or the world, I'm not a humanitarian assistance expert. This is not something that I'm trained in, but I am a military professional, and I've seen it throughout history. And the humanitarian assistance portion should be done by a humanitarian organization or organizations plural, not by the military.
Okay.
I want to ask you something, a small kind of personal question. During your time in Gaza or in Israel, were you able to have any exchanges with your peers in the IDF?
Yes,
people
every
in your
day.
rank? Did any of them express the concerns and doubts that you're sharing with us now, or were they in a completely different space?
Well, so I engaged with Israeli Defense Forces every day, whether it was the senior officers in the operations centers, the IDF liaison officers that were provided, which were in the ranks of lieutenant colonel, colonel, one-star general, that were there. And I also, on every day, shook hands, hugged, and talked to the IDF soldiers in Gaza every day because they were next to our sites. I clearly remember this one discussion I had. I was at secure distribution site number 1, which is the furthest south, and there's a IDF base right outside the corner of it. It's right there next to it. And we had gone there before distribution started. This was probably we had gone there on the 21st, and then we went back out again on like the 24th to get a final assessment before we started. And I was at site number 1, and I went up to one of the guard towers, and I was looking out at the Mediterranean and looking at the terrain, and I saw the Israeli forces, the units that were in the area, and there was an IDF infantry squad that was there by the tower in some shade. And I was standing there, I looked at them, and they're like, "Oh, you're an American, this and that." We were talking, they spoke English. And the guy said to me, "Why are you feeding our enemy? Why are you coming here and feeding our enemy and making this harder on us?"
This was an officer or a grunt?
A grunt and an enlisted soldier, which, you know, I obviously didn't have a good answer for that. I mean, I'm like, but it hit me in terms of that's a perception, that's a view. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm saying, but it is a view. It is from their perspective what they see. We're now coming in and taking away resources and combat power and putting the IDF in danger, at risk, and potentially feeding the enemy, whether Hamas gets a certain percentage of it or not. So I completely understand that perspective from the ground. I don't agree with that perspective, but I understand that perspective. I take things in terms of, I don't have to agree with something to still understand and appreciate it. So I understood and appreciated that perspective from what this Israeli soldier saw on the ground. Up the level, it seemed to me like at the lieutenant colonel level, it seemed to me like it was almost obligatory, with this sense of like, we have to do this, so fine, we'll do it, and we'll just. It didn't seem to me like there was a desire to do it, like there was an intrinsic motivation to do it. It was just kind of our government said that we have to do this, so we have to do it. So I never really engaged with any Israeli officers that were like, yes, let's deliver aid, it's super important. What the senior officers that I met in Gaza, their primary concern was always, as it should be, as it absolutely should be, their primary concerns were always the tactical and operational safety of the soldiers that were there. That was their focus. And so if our plan was like, hey, we're going to open distribution here, and there's going to be 8,000 people coming through here, those commanders would often say like, whoa, like we have units that are going to be conducting operations through here. We shouldn't do that. They were often overruled by the higher level leadership saying, nope, we're going to do it anyway. But I felt for them because their concerns were valid. The safety of the Israeli forces in the area.
And so, Anthony, that's a great segue to another question that is keep coming, is like, what a day-to-day look like? I mean, like,
Okay.
how does the food get to the sites? I mean, and what is the ratio between the security personnel, or what is your job as a security personnel comparing to the job of the soldiers? And what are the risks of allegedly crimes that you were talking about that is driven by the day-to-day work?
Yeah, I think the war crimes that I witnessed and the violations of humanitarian law that I witnessed, I in no way.
Before we get to that, I mean, like, can you explain like the day-to-day, like
Yes, yes,
what
I'm
is
going.
like, how do you decide where to send food, how much food? I mean, is it enough food? And how is it what the ratio of soldiers to security UG solution people?
Okay,
and why is it a risk?
So I'm going to break each of those down, because those are all that's a lot of questions there, and they're all distinct. So
Yeah.
I'm going to break that down. So the day-to-day operation every day. So all of the aid comes into the port of Ashdod. It gets loaded, then it gets trucked down to Karim Shalom, and it gets staged. Once we know how much aid is there that came off the trucks or the boats that's there, we then have a meeting with the IDF, led by representatives of Kogat, so at 11 o'clock at the main control center outside of Supa Crossing, where the main SRS GHF control center is, We then have a meeting, and the GHF sit down, and they tell us, or the IDF tell us, the security, they tell us what sites we're going to go to, how much aid we're going to distribute, what time we're going to distribute it, where, if how many sites we're going to do in a day, if it's going to be all 4, if it's going to be 1, if it's going to be 2, whatever. They dictate all of that. So how the day kind of starts is with that. But then so that every morning at 7, before we have this meeting, an Israeli Defense Force unit is then tasked to drive all the routes, clear all the routes before we have aid trucks moving down, and then to then also use drones to fly over the area to scan it as well. That gets done. We have our plan from how we're going to distribute aid. We leave from the control center with the empty trucks, escorted by IDF to gate 231, which is the super crossing gate. We come into Gaza. We go down to Karim Shalom, and we take those trucks there, and those trucks get loaded with the aid that's sitting there. Then we drive out to the site. So if it's site 1, 2, or 3, we're driving down the Philadelphia corridor to those sites. If it's going to site 4, we then have to drive all the way back up the border road, that buffer zone border road in the east, up to gate 96 to then go into Gaza to site 4. So all of that is escorted by the IDF. They move with us. They secure the checkpoints. They secure the routes. When we get to a site, if as let's just say on a Tuesday, we're going to distribute aid from site number 2, secure distribution site number 2. And the messaging is put out from Kogat that we're going to distribute at site number 2 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, the Palestinians are already, or the Gazans, the civilians, are already making their way down to that site much earlier because they have to walk. So hours ahead of time, they're walking, and the IDF are then given the task to hold them, to contain them. And this is for all 3 sites in the south. Contain them at the intersection of the Marag corridor and the coastal road along the coast, the coastal road. The coastal road in the Marag corridor, that's a holding area. There have been that location right there, when you read in the news or you hear about civilians that were killed near the sites, that's where a lot of that happens. And it's because the IDF are put in a very precarious situation. It's a difficult ethical dilemma where you have thousands of civilians in a mass crowd, and you're there as an IDF soldier, and there's only 10 or 12 of you, and you're trying to control that. It is an ethical dilemma. It is difficult. It is hard. So at the time of distribution, let's say again in this anecdote, it's 1 o'clock. The IDF then move away and release this crowd of people. And I don't mean a couple hundred. I'm talking 8,000 to 10,000 people at one time rushing. So think of a tidal wave, right? Like every day the beaches hit the coast. But then when a tidal wave comes in, it's just this massive amount of water. So a tidal wave of people, thousands of people all at one time rushing down the Marag corridor, right in between Israeli Defense Force positions. The Israeli Defense Forces didn't put their positions there after. The Israelis were there already. So these huge, massive amounts of people are coming right through the Israeli Defense Force positions. It's so dangerous and irresponsible. And then as they move down to the road, each distribution site has its own road that comes from the Marag corridor to that location. So for example, if they're moving to secure distribution site 2, they then get channeled down that road. But the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, again, a recommendation I made early on, refused to spend money on signs or barriers The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation put the responsibility on the IDF. You control them. When they get down to the site and they come onto the site, it's what I call the survival games, or survival of the fittest, or the Hunger Games. 8 to 10,000 people rushing onto this giant pile of aid. It's not lined up, it's not distributed, it's not handed out, it's not tracked and verified. Just a massive thousands of people coming onto the site and taking all the food. I call it the 8 minutes of mayhem. In 8 minutes, I've timed it. I've sat there and I've timed it. 8 minutes for 9 to 10,000 people to sweep through and go through 25,000 boxes of aid and take it all. What the procedure has become for the UG Solutions contractors, because they were not provided with any rules of engagement or legal rules or any standard operating procedures, nothing. None of that was provided. So they just, what kind of organically grew out of that, every day on a site after the distribution is complete, the UG Solutions personnel begin pushing the civilians off of the distribution site with stun grenades, pepper spray, tear gas. And as the civilians are leaving and getting towards the exit, in order to keep them moving, the UG Solutions personnel then begin shooting at their feet, shooting over their head, shooting at them at times, into the crowd at times. I've witnessed this, to push them off of the site. Once they get off of the site, the problem you had where you had 8 to 10,000 people rushing coming in, you now have 8 to 10,000 people rushing going out, right into the Israeli positions. So the war crimes that I witnessed on both sides, from UG Solutions and within the IDF, it's because the IDF soldiers in this area that are there, that they're supposed to be fighting Hamas and winning this war, they're put in a very difficult ethical dilemma where firing on civilians or not, who's the enemy, who's not, who's a threat, who's not. How do you pick out a threat out of a crowd of 8,000 people? Who in that crowd has a rocket-propelled grenade that's going to shoot it at you? Who in that crowd has a rifle that's going to shoot it at you? It's very tense. It shouldn't be that way. That is another reason as to why you do not build distribution sites where you're going to have thousands of civilians moving right through a military operational area. It puts the soldiers at risk. It is a bad design. It is a bad execution. And it leads me to believe that even beyond like the lower level IDF, that there's a different reason, there's a different purpose than humanitarian aid. I don't think the purpose is to distribute humanitarian aid. I think the purpose is to displace the population.
And how do you see this displacement happening? Sorry, Noga.
What do you mean? How do I think it's happening?
I mean, like people are not able to go back after they take the food.
So flip to the map again.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
hold on. Yep. Let me do.
If I live in
Okay, hold on. Can you see
so
it?
let's just look at this, where the people are and where they aren't. So if I'm in Gaza City, north of the Netzarim corridor, I can't come south at all. I'm isolated up there. So everything north of the Netzarim is isolated. That's shut out. If I live near Nusharim camp, Barij camp, Magazu camp, those areas, or in those neighborhoods, I go to site number 4. When I go to site number 4, I'm not crossing through a military corridor, or I'm not crossing through an area. So if I'm there, I can go up to site 4 and come back. If I live in Derbala or Mawasi or Khan Yunis or the northern part of Rafah, north of the Marag corridor, I have to go to site 1, 2, or 3. So let's say I live in central Khan Yunis, and I wake up in the morning and I'm told, hey, distribution is going to be at site number 1 at noon. Well, I go with my family, or I go by myself, and I start my journey west to the coastal corridor, south along the coastal corridor, to stand in line and wait in this massive crowd at the Morag corridor intersection.
And
When
this
the
is about
crowd
10 kilometers. How long is this walk?
Well, it's a different length for everybody. I know that, depending on where you're coming from, but on average, even from the closest area, because you can't just, like, if I'm at let's say I'm at Nasser Hospital, I just can't walk straight down to site number 3. I have to walk all the way west to the coastal road, and then south on the coastal road to the Morag corridor, and then come back to the site through the Morag corridor. It's all controlled. I can't just go there. I can only access the sites from the roads that lead from the Morag corridor. I can only get to the Morag corridor entrance through the coastal road. I have to go to the coastal road to get down there. So I'm having to do this this box or move around every time I need to go somewhere. So it adds. So if I'm in central Khan Yunis, so kind of where the white area is there in Khan Yunis, central Khan Yunis, I may have a 15-kilometer walk just to get to the site, because I'm walking 3 kilometers this way, 10 kilometers that way, 2 kilometers that way. I'm doing a box instead of a straight line. So
and you're not confirmed you will get a box.
And you're not confirmed that you'll get a box. And unless you're in the fastest and the strongest, that when they release the line, run to the site. And I have video of this showing it, this massive crowd just running towards there. So in a massive crowd of people, who do you think are the slower ones? Who do you think are in the back? Children, women, the disabled, the hungry, the starving. So, and they get nothing, because by the time they show up to the site, there's nothing left. 8 minutes, the food's gone. So you walk 15 kilometers to get to a location to get food and end up getting nothing. But the other part of this that I want to emphasize that isn't often seen is that if I'm in Khan Yunis and I walk south to site number 1, 2, or 3, well, I go down the Morag corridor, and then I go south of the Morag corridor. I have to go south into that Rafah area. I'm south of the Morag corridor. I get my food. I get on the road and I walk back. Well, once I hit the Morag corridor again, I can't go north. I can't go back. I can't go back to where I came from. So I'm then sent to the IDF have a corridor to where I'm then sent to either Nasser camp, Khan Yunis camp, Mawasi camp. There's another camp along the coast, to these various camps. So if I leave my house to go get food, I'm never coming back.
I wanted, while we have the map here, I just want to point out 2 things just to make them explicit. The plan that you're describing and the map that we see in front of us, first of all, seems destined to simply starve out anyone who lives in northern Gaza.
Correct.
So I think we have to emphasize this point, and it also explains why, as matters got more and more and more acute in recent weeks, and something clearly snapped in the Israeli authorities in recent days, the first thing they did was to airlift aid into northern Gaza. I think
That's
listening
right.
to Anthony, listening to you, we have a much clearer idea of why the crisis was worst there. The other thing I want to say,
It's completely shut off and isolated.
right. The other thing I want to add is part of the psychological warfare that's being waged, principally, I would say in this case, by the Israeli government towards the Israeli people. And it's a word that you've obviously chosen not to use, but it's part of a dehumanization campaign. So the truly horrific distribution method, if we'll call it that, that you're describing, seems to me aimed at making these Gazans who are desperate for food look like animals, look like savages. I think
Yes,
one
that
of
is exactly the design of the process, the design of how you get to the site, how you get the food. It is 100% by design to dehumanize the civilian population and to give the appearance to the outside that they are animals. They are cattle. They are just herded from point to point, and they don't have value. And the reason, and I want to say this because one of the reasons that I wanted to come on and talk to this, and I talk to people, and it's one of the pictures that we'll get to. So we'll just talk about it right now because I think it's an important time to talk about this. Go to the other picture there, the picture of the young boy.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, this is emotional for me to get through, and I want to tell everybody, I served in the Army for 25 years. I've been shot 3 times in combat. I'm pretty tough. This gets me every time because, to what you're saying, the dehumanization. And what I want to say to the American people and to the people of Israel, I've been there. I have touched them. I have talked to them. The civilians in Gaza that are getting the food, they are starving. They are not animals. They're human beings. And they're being treated like animals. We treat these civilians in Gaza worse, with less dignity than we treated the ISIS fighters that surrendered in Baghuz Fakani in Syria in 2018. We treat the civilians in Gaza worse than we treated ISIS, if that's any indication to the level of inhumanity. This young boy, this is on May 28th on secure distribution site number 2. The aid had been distributed. A lot of people had left. You see behind, there's a crowd of people still with their boxes, kind of getting ready to leave. And this little boy, his name is Amir, and he was standing, he was with the crowd, but he walks over, and you see that first picture on the top right. He kind of walks over to me, and he puts out his hand. And at first I thought like that he wanted more food or something, and I felt bad because I didn't have anything. But I was like, oh, I have nothing. And he puts out his hand, and so I beckoned him to come to me. I said, come here. And he reaches out and he holds my hand and he kisses my hand. He kisses my hand, and he says, Shukran. You can see in this picture that this little boy is not wearing shoes. His clothes are falling off of him because he's so skinny. I put my hand on his left shoulder, and I looked at him, and he's looking at me. We're looking at each other in the eyes. And I say to him, people care. You're a human being, and people care about you. The world cares. That's not Hamas. That's not a Hamas fighter. And I looked at him and I said, the world cares. And he put down the little food he has. You notice he doesn't have a box. He doesn't have a box of food. He has half of a bag of rice that he found on the ground, a broken bag, half a bag of lentils that he found on the ground. And he was thanking us. Thank you. This little boy, from where he came from, walked 12 kilometers to get there, just to get there. 12 kilometers. Look at this boy. And when he got there, he thanked us for the remnants and the small crumbs that he got. And he sets them down on the ground, because I was kneeling at this point, and he sets his food down, and he places his hands on my face, on the side of my face, on my cheeks, these frail, skeleton, emaciated hands, dirty. And he puts them on my face, and he kissed me. He kissed me, and he said, thank you, in English. Thank you. And he collected his items, and he walked back to the group. And then he was shot at with pepper spray and tear gas and stun grenades and bullets shot at his feet and in the air. And he runs away scared. I was on the inside of the site, so there's berms that surround the site, so I couldn't see outside of the site. So the last group of people, women and children and small children and kids and children and babies, are leaving the site. And as they're leaving the site and they get to the next intersection, I hear machine gun fire. It startled me because I didn't know what was going on. So I ran up to the berm. You see the berm behind him there. I ran up to the berm so I could look. And I run up to the berm and I get down and I'm kind of like in a covered position and I'm looking like, oh, what's going on? I thought we were being attacked. And the IDF were shooting at the crowd. And I want to point this out. When they left the site, the road to leave the site is covered on both sides by a berm. The IDF can't see that. All the IDF get to see from where their position is that as these civilians come out and they hit that main corridor, they don't, if they're shooting warning shots to control the population from going east, they can't see on the other side of that berm. And they don't even know that. They don't know that they can't see that because they didn't, they don't have control of the sites. They have to stay away from the sites. So they're shooting to control the population that's along the Marag corridor. And as they're doing that, they're shooting into this crowd. And Palestinian civilians, human beings, are dropping to the ground, getting shot. And Amir was one of them. Amir walked 12 kilometers to get food, got nothing but scraps, thanked us for it, and died. That's what we're doing. That's not the only occasion. That happens every day at some point in the sites. Innocent civilians being shot at. Not because of the evilness of the IDF soldier, but because of the lack of responsibility of the leadership and the people in charge that put these sites where they're at, that put the IDF and the UG Solutions contractors in this horrible ethical dilemma of having to protect yourself and having to deal with a crowd of 8,000 to 10,000 people. It's brutal. It is inhumane. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation process needs to end to then allow humanitarian aid groups that do that to do the aid so that the military, so that the IDF is not responsible for the distribution of the aid that then puts them in a position where they either have to choose between their life or their safety or trying to figure out who's out in the crowd of 8,000 people. It's not fair to the IDF.
Anthony, I want to thank you first of all for this description because I'm sure it's not easy. And I know for everyone listening to you, it's almost unbearably painful to hear this testimony, but it's hugely important. I don't know how many of these experiences you had or how many sets of pictures you have like of this little boy, Amir, but I think it's very important to humanize these figures. Every day someone in my situation, a journalist, every day I'm called upon to report on 28 killed today, 43, we're not sure. The IDF says, we don't think it was 79. That doesn't conform with our figures. And we end up somehow falling into a trap of dehumanization ourselves, of discussing whether the quote unquote Hamas figures are correct or the IDF figures, but they're not releasing them. And we get lost. And so this incident that you just described with such precision is an extremely important one to have out there. And I want to thank you. I want to ask you one more question. I don't know, actually, Offir, how much time we still.
Well, I owe Olif one more answer because he asked me about the amount of food, and that's a quick answer. Let me answer that one real quick because this is also very important for people to understand. So, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation proselytizes their amount of aid that they've given, right? So just today, Johnny Moore, the head of GHF, is interviewing with Israeli news. And he keeps saying, we're the only ones doing it. Okay, well, you're the only ones doing it because you came into the process and said, UN, don't do it, we're going to do it. You took that on. You took on that responsibility. And then they say, we've delivered 92 million meals. And I look at that number and I say, you should not be proud of that. That is scary. That is inhumane because if they've been delivering aid since the 26th of May to the 28th of July now. So 64 days, right? And then 64 days delivering to a population of 2.2 million total. I'm talking about total population. 3 meals a day. Well, 3 meals a day to 2.2 million people, and you've only done 92 million meals. You've only provided enough in 64 days. You've only provided enough for 13 days of food. What happened to the other 51 days of food? Even if you were to break out those 92 million meals to say that it's 1 meal a day, then at that point, it's like, what happened to that other week of food? We are starving people. We are starving them. And we're celebrating it with, look how great we did. And we did not do great. It is failing. And the people of Israel and the people of America and the people of the humane world that call ourselves human beings need to wake up and look at this, because, as you said, we cannot lose our way. We cannot become them. And when I mean them, I mean we cannot become Hamas. We cannot become ISIS. Those are their tactics. We cannot become them. We must maintain our values. We must maintain our humanity. And what we're doing to these civilians in Gaza is inhumane and it's barbaric. And we will be on the wrong side of history if we continue down this road.
I want to add, as a journalist, that as terrible as the statistics that you just cited are, we have no way of even verifying that.
Okay, yes. We can't even verify that. I'm just taking it at best case scenario, face value. You're still failing. You can't. I've done the math, and I'm going to tell you, I'll go on the record and say that they haven't delivered 92 million meals. I know how many meals are there per box, how many boxes per pallet, how many pallets per trucks, how many trucks go in, and how many days we've been delivered. We haven't delivered 92 million meals. They have not. They are lying. They are lying. But if that's what they're going to claim, 92 million meals, even then, you are failing to the point of creating mass starvation and famine.
Offir, you're muted. Offir, you're on mute.
Yep, I saw it. So I mean, like I was just saying that, I mean, like first, I mean, like when you describe this incident with Amir, my young son is the name Amir. So it's kind of like,
I'm sorry.
no, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. And I want to be respectful of your time and the translators and everyone else. And there's so many more questions. And I would say up front that, I mean, anyone who is trying to, I mean, ask me about the GHF response to what Anthony is saying, so you can read the GHF official response to that and make your judgment. I mean, people are asking me like, I mean, they're saying you were be fired, and I saw on channel 13 that you were not. You actually quit. So maybe you can just say that, because I know that many people will want to share this video later.
Yeah, and I'll say it on the record, and I can share it with all of you. I'll send it to you, Offir. I'll send it to you. On the 13th of June, I terminated my contract because at that point I had seen not just the death of Amir, but also UG Solutions people. UG Solutions, not Hamas or blame it on the IDF or whatever. UG Solutions personnel on 2 occasions. One time used a stun grenade that killed a woman on the site. Another time shooting at the population and severely wounded and or killed, I think he was dead, a Palestinian man. So there was that incident and another incident and another incident. And I brought each of these to the attention of the leadership. It became clear to me that it's not because they could not fix it. It's because they didn't want to. So on the 13th of June, I tendered my resignation. I said, here you go. I can't do this anymore. But what I want everybody to also know, hear it from me, is that when I tendered that resignation, I wasn't going home. I wasn't quitting the effort to feed the civilians. I just couldn't do it as an armed contractor giving food at the barrel of a gun and being complicit in the war crimes that I saw. I couldn't be a part of that. I tendered my resignation, and I was going to then stay to work with other organizations to help them with planning and operations, and use my expertise to help them to deliver aid in a humanitarian way. So anybody out there that says that I was fired, garbage. In fact, UG Solutions on 3 occasions promoted me and gave me 3 raises while we were there, because to your point before, you remember you made the discussion that Jake Wood stepped down on the 26th. He was like, I don't want to be a part of this. On the 27th, the number 2 guy in charge in Israel, the number 2 man in charge, resigned, quit. He's like, I can't be a part of this anymore. So UG Solutions comes to me and they offered me that job. So I was not fired. I ran their operations. They relied on me for everything. And at every step of the way, when I provided a recommendation, they wouldn't implement it. And the reason they wouldn't implement the recommendation is because it costs money. They don't want to cut away from the bottom line of their profit. It's about money. So I could no longer be a part of that. I tendered my resignation. And Offir, I'll send you that letter. I tendered my resignation in writing. And my hope and desire was to work for another entity, but then on the 13th, Iran started the war, and things kind of changed. So I was ultimately not able to do that. But yeah, I was not fired. Quite the opposite. I was promoted 3 times, and I tendered my resignation on my own. I resigned because I could not be a part of it anymore.
I want to add just about, I don't know anything about UG Solutions, as apparently you didn't when you were hired.
I didn't either. I still don't know much.
Right. So I just want to add for the public here who will be watching, we know very little about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It seemed to have been cut out of whole cloth magically. We know that the Boston Consulting Group had something to do with it. Apparently, that's right, but not just stepped away, they fired and are investigating.
Yeah, and condemned it.
That's right. So they felt tricked by some of their own senior consultants who they felt deceived them about the extent of their involvement in this. And we also don't know much about the funding behind this. In Israel, this entire entity has really referred to with a lot of caution, I have to say, because nobody knows where it came from, what it is. You seem to me to be describing a front organization incompetently run with, doing the bidding of politicians far away. This is a story as old as humanity.
It is. And that's why I'll say it on the record coming from my mouth. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is a front for rich people to get richer, to take the need of starving people, put it under the facade of a get rich fast scheme with zero concern about how the quality of the mission's being done, because they're getting paid. And that's what they care about.
Are you talking about the contract, those people under contract for them? Who's getting rich here?
So Safe Reach Solutions, UG Solutions, they're for profit. They're not there as an NGO. They are for profit businesses, and they are in this for the money. And even like to SRS, who's in charge of the overall contract, things brought to their attention like, this is a war crime. Well, the IDF are fine with it, so it's not on us. I'm like, what? Like, yes, it is. Like I'm telling you that the world is starting to pay attention. And when this box gets opened up, it's going to be real ugly. And as Americans and as Israelis, We have the opportunity now to raise our hand and say that is wrong, because reckoning is coming. And if we don't put a stop to this, and if we don't collectively say this is wrong, we are responsible. And when that day of reckoning comes, when the rest of the world looks at how horrible this is, we're responsible if we don't do something about it now.
I want to quote one of my most esteemed colleagues, Nir Hasson, who writes for Haaretz, who tweeted not that long ago, after one of these catastrophic incidents that you're just describing, he said, one day, not too far off, the term "we pulled a GHF" is going to be used to describe creating a disaster.
Yes, actually, funny. I actually use that term. Like if I make a mistake, I said I just UG'd it, because yeah, you are exactly correct. It's going to be a term, a meme term, when you mess something up really bad. You GHF'd it.
Okay, it's devastating, and I just came. I'm just I told you, Anthony, when yesterday when I talked, or 2 days ago, and I mean, as a Jew and as someone that had grandparents, my grandma survived the Holocaust. I mean, there was a term in that we appreciated so much, the people who saved even one Jew. It was called the righteous. It's basically the term is the righteous among the nations. And I don't know if what you have been doing by telling the story, going to Congress and put yourself in the front. I'm sure it's risky, and I'm sure it's. I hope that your family is safe, and I hope that we could actually do something good by bringing your voice. Uh, um, and I don't know. I mean, like we are going to try and do whatever we can to stop this war and bring all the hostages home. And if we could dismantle Hamas, we could. But I mean, after 18 months, it's clear that it's not being done in the right way. So we need to end the war and bring everyone home and solve the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Any last
The
words
thing
you want to
is
say?
that I know that we can do better, and I know that we can address this problem in a humane way. But we have to make the choice to do that. It's not going to happen on its own.
And we already see the government now understanding and trying to do humanitarian ceasefires and whatever. So we both, I mean, when we say we, I mean like Israel government, and we are saying usually we are not our government, but obviously the government of Israel now understand that they did both mistake, and they're probably trying to fix it. But on the same time, we hear the ministers that are just saying, posting photos of like the new Riviera and not even talking about the humane problem. Noga.
I would like to say something just to wrap it up. At the end of the day, in every country that is defined as a democracy, it's the government that gives the orders to the military, right? And in Israel, that relation between military and government right now is in a profound crisis. As, by the way, Anthony, it was as if you knew about what happened today in Israel. 3 soldiers from an elite unit from the Nachal Brigade who served more than a year in Gaza and reported that they were on the verge of breakdown and requested psychological help were instead sentenced to military prison today. This became a big scandal in Israel. Eventually, that decision was reversed and they were instead reprimanded by the commander. But I just want to give everyone here an idea of how deep the crisis is for these conscripted soldiers who are 18 years old and receiving orders. And I also want to say, in terms of living in a free society where we still have the right to vote, the government of Israel today is represented by people who not that long ago, just 2 years ago, were far beyond the political pale. One former head of the Mossad described Netanyahu's ministers as being the equivalent of the KKK, and he has a very serious point. And I'm saying this simply that elections have consequences. And I think that a significant part of what we just heard Anthony describe, and despite the horrors, I feel like we had the honor of hearing you describe this, is a result of irresponsible, inexperienced fanatics who were elected to office for politicized reasons and in many cases, under false pretenses. And I think that's one of the messages that we should take home from this truly horrific testimony that we've been privileged to hear. So thank you.
So thank you, everyone.
I thank all of you for the time and you taking the time, and thank you, Offir, for having me. I'm thankful and I'm grateful for people to hear this, and the power is in the truth.
Yeah.
And
you
that's
were
all this
speaking to
is.
the Congress, as you said to me, this is a way for me to speak to the people, the American people. So you went and spoke to the Congress. Let's wrap it up. Anthony, Noga, Regina, Janet, Sharon, who took time from her vacation, David, and so many other people that help us to take this to here. We are going to meet again. I'm going to send a note on Wednesday with Professor Shikma Bressler, because we need to figure out how to make sure we're not continuing in the messianic way and go back to the Jewish democratic way. And I will see you soon. Be strong. Keep fighting. Fighting for the good. Being good trouble, as Joe was said. And I will see you soon. Just be safe and keep fighting for end of the war and bring them home. Bye.
Offir, I'll send you that termination letter just so you have it.
I will forward it to everyone. Perfect. Bye-bye.